Hello everybody, welcome back. This is Miss V and we're here with World War One. We're looking at the Russian Revolution and the aftermath of World War One. What happened towards the end? How did World War One end and how did it affect the entire world? So let's go ahead and find out. So in the Russian Revolution, in World War One overall, World War One was known as this total war, or it was including everyone. Everyone was enlisted in doing something in the war, either at home or those that were in the military abroad in Europe. So everybody was contributing in some way. In the United States, women were working in the factories, manufacturing war materials for the military and sending war care packages and so forth. Even the children were involved in some form of fashion where growing crops and so forth in the farms or what have you to send to military. So every citizen in some form of fashion in a warring country was involved. And that's what total war means. Now, Russia was very, very unprepared militaristically and even in industrial sake or technology sake for a total war, because they were also in a war prior to, in 1905, the Russo-Japanese War, and that brought down a lot of depleted a lot of their sources or their resources. So because they were unable to produce weapons they needed for their army at that time, this was not a good idea for them to be involved in such a massive war, and it cost them dearly in terms of casualties as well. So during this time of World War One, Tsar Nicholas II was the leader, and he was a part of the Romanov dynasty. However, he used his army and his bureaucracy to really hold up his regime because it was faltering after all of these wars that they were involved in. And a group of Russian working class and even his own army started to refuse to take orders from him, and eventually he was forced to abdicate or to remove himself or dethrone himself from power. Okay? And that ended the Romanov dynasty. So now there was a group of people that's called Soviets, and they were like this radical or this really fast changing, growing group of lower class Russians. And they started to organize themselves in army units in the factory towns and rural areas. And within the Soviets, there was a group called the Bolsheviks that worked their way into the political structure. And eventually they were able to have control of the political structure, this provisional government, after Tsar Nicholas II stepped down from power. As you see here, this person right here is Vladimir Lenin. And Vladimir Lenin became this leader of the Bolsheviks, and their goal was to destroy capitalism at its core. They believed that capitalism was the bane of society. Of course, coming from Karl Marx, right? From the ideologies of Karl Marx. And they wanted to do that through revolution. They wanted to, in some form of fashion, they believed that violent overthrow or violent change or rapid, violent, necessary change is going to destroy capitalism. Eventually, that's what they did. They overthrow the provisional government, and now they are in charge, and they call themselves communists. And this is where the word communism comes from. Now, Lenin, during this time, remember, the war is still happening, right? World War One is still going on. But he made a promise to the people of Russia that he was going to bring peace to Russia and get them out of World War One. So to follow up on his promise, he signs this treaty, Brest-Litovsk, and I hope I said that right, with Germany in 1918, and that ended Russia's participation in the war. But in a negotiation like this, right, in a treaty like this, of course, there's give and take. There's never something that does not benefit both parties. And Russia lost territories such as the Ukraine, Finland, the Baltic provinces, and part of eastern Poland. So keep in mind, as you see here, Russia lost Ukraine. This is from you see here the 1918s, right? How does that figure into what we're talking about today, or what's happening today, right? Think about it. So now you have this new political party, or this new government in Russia. And for about 3 years, there's a civil war, there's a battle, because there were people that did not agree with this new communist party. And they were called the White Party, okay? And the communists were called the Red Army. So you had the White Army and the Red Army. Those that were anti-communist and those that were communist were red. Those that were anti-communist were white. And this civil war continued for a long time, 3 years. The White Army was backed by the Allies, and they were given more materials and so forth to support their cause of anti-communism, because the Allied nations were a bit concerned about the ideals of the Communist Party. However, Russia, or the Communist Party, or the Red Army, wins, and now Russia is transformed into this strong, hard, centralized, single party state or country dominated by this Communist Party. Eventually they take over, and they also take over nation states such as Georgia, Russian Armenia, and Azerbaijan. Okay, so let's think of just going back to what we were discussing before. Since Russia switched to a communist system, how do you think that's going to affect their alliances overall? Remember who they were aligned with at first, and now that they're out of World War I, and now that they have this communist system, how do you think that's going to affect their alliances, and how do you think it's going to affect Russia in the future as well? Write it down in Edpuzzle or in the comments. Thanks for tuning in to this first half discussing the Russian Revolution during World War I. Tune into the next half, which will talk about the aftermath, or the ending of World War I, and how it affected the world in general. See you soon.